When people imagined the mountain men of early America, they pictured rifles, traps, axes, and buckskin coats. They imagined lonely figures crossing snowy passes, stalking beaver through the frozen streams, surviving on grit and instinct. But many of these men depended on something far quieter, something lighter than a horse, something older than the United States itself. A craft so simple it looked primitive, yet so sophisticated it could carry men, trade goods, furs, and more. I'm talking about the canoe. For many mountain men, it was not just transportation, it was the extension of the body, a survival tool and one of the top inventions used in the North American wilderness. Before roads crossed the interior of America, rivers did. Waterways were the first highways of the continent. The Missouri, Yellowstone, Columbia, Snake, Green, and countless other smaller tributaries formed natural routes deep into the lands few Americans had seen. To the mountain men and fur traders of the late 18th and early 19th centuries, rivers offered something no wagon trail could: movement with weight, a lot of weight. A horse could carry one man and some gear, but a canoe could carry pelts, traps, powder, trade goods, food, and sometimes several men at once. Where forests were thick and mountains were brutal, rivers became the easier path, and the canoe became the key. Now, canoes was not invented by fur trappers. Its mastery came from native peoples across North America who had refined canoe designs over the centuries. Birch bark canoes in the north, dugout canoes in the wooded regions, bull boats on the plains, skin boats in some western areas. Each was adapted to the local waters and materials. European traders and later American frontiersmen quickly learned a humbling truth. Survival often meant learning from those who already understood the land. The canoe was one of the clearest examples of that. Many fur trappers who entered the wilderness were moved through wilderness relying on indigenous technology. Without that borrowed wisdom from the natives, some would have never made it. At first glance, a canoe can seem basic: wood, bark, hide, ribs, lashings, and pitch. No engine, no iron complexity, no gears. But when you look closer, every curve matters. Too narrow and it becomes unstable. Too wide and it loses speed. Too shallow and the cargo suffers. Too deep and wind can take control. The finest canoes balance speed, strength, buoyancy, flexibility, and repairability. That is engineering at its finest. A canoe damaged on a riverbank might be patched with bark, hide, resin, wood strips, or fresh lashings. That mattered more than looking perfect. For trappers in the fur trade, cargo was everything. Beaver pelts were wealth, traps were their livelihood. Powder and lead meant food and self-defense. Blankets, kettles, knives, tobacco, and trade goods were economic lifelines. A canoe transformed what a man could move through the wilderness. Instead of dragging heavy loads over rough ground, goods could glide downstream. Even upstream travel, hard labor with poles, paddles, ropes, or towing from shore was often more practical than forcing it through a dense forest or broken rock. This made the canoe very special, a very important resource to have. Not every mountain man was equal on rivers. Some were brilliant horsemen, but poor watermen. Others developed extraordinary skills reading current, depth, hidden snags, and changing weather. To guide a loaded canoe on a river in the wild required special judgment. One wrong move could swamp supplies, ruin powder, lose furs, or drown men miles from help. The best canoe men learned to read rivers the way scouts would read tracks in the forest. They watched surface ripples for submerged danger. They knew where channels shifted. They sensed when to hug shore and when to cross current. In many frontier places, this knowledge could be more valuable than marksmanship. During the North American fur trade, French voyageurs, British traders, and later American trappers all depended heavily on the canoe transport. The upper Missouri and northern trade networks especially relied on rivercraft to move massive quantities of goods and pelts. Even where larger keelboats and later steamboats appeared, smaller canoes remained essential for side routes, shallow tributaries, scouting, trapping, runs, and local movement. A large vessel might bring goods to a region. The canoe brought them into the wild. Men connected to Rocky Mountain fur trade moved through systems where rivers and smaller craft were often the last mile of the empire. The canoe offered something else the wilderness valued: silence. A wagon rattles, a horse can be loud, boots break branches, but a paddle entering water can be nearly soundless. For hunting, reconnaissance, or avoiding hostile encounters, quiet movement mattered. A man drifting through dawn mist with only the dip of his paddle could pass unnoticed where louder travel would fail. That silence gave the canoe an almost ghost-like advantage. When rapids blocked progress, cargo had to be unloaded. Canoes had to then be carried overland, packs hauled again. Mosquitoes swarmed, mud sucked at boots, shoulders beginning to burn as they hike carrying the canoe. A canoe was freedom on water. Mountain men continued to use canoes because even with hardship, the alternatives were often worse. That is true test of frontier tool, not comfort, but its usefulness. For some wilderness men, the canoe became a part of their identity. It required balance, patience, rhythm, and respect. It punished arrogance quickly. It taught the economy of movement. Strong strokes wasted less than frantic ones. A well-trimmed load beat brute force. Knowledge beat muscle. That philosophy mirrored the frontier survival itself. The canoe rewarded men who adapted rather than dominated. Why it matters today. Modern people often mistake sophistication for machinery, but the canoe reminds us that true sophistication can be simple. It used natural materials, it could be repaired in the field, it moved people efficiently. The canoe required skill more than just fuel. For mountain men, it was not primitive at all. It was advanced in only the way that mattered. When we picture the frontier, we often glorify rifles and revolvers, but steel alone did not open the wilderness routes. Water did, and the craft that mastered water was the canoe. It carried trade, it carried trappers, it carried survival itself. For many mountain men, the canoe was more than wood and bark. It was judgment, movement, freedom, and ingenuity. An extension of the owner, quiet, strong, and adaptable, just like the mountain men who trusted it. Until next time, see you in the next video.